Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have my June wrap-up for you. However, as always, I have already done a mid-month check-in in which I talked about the books that I read in the first half of the month. Those books were these here. I had The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Four Profound Weaves by R.B. Lemberg, A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martin, Collected Plays by Oscar Wilde, The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, A Dark Queen Rises by Ashok K. Banker, Honeycomb by Joanne M. Harris, and also White Sand Volume 2 by Brandon Sanderson. So if you're interested in learning more about my thoughts on these books, go and check out my mid-month check-in. As always, it will be linked down below and up there. But now let's get into my final monthly wrap-up. And let's quickly get into it because I have a few books I need to talk about. First, the two books that I don't physically have here, so I won't forget about them. The first of those is The Dark Talent by Brandon Sanderson. This is the fifth book in the Alcatraz series, which is Brandon Sanderson's middle grade series. This series follows Alcatraz Smedry, who finds out that he belongs to a family with, well, some very weird talents. He, for example, has the talent to break things, his grandfather has the talent to always be too late, and so on. You get what I'm going for. And yeah, so we follow Alcatraz Smedry on his adventures, kind of, against the evil librarians. And so yeah, this was the fifth book. I enjoyed it. I gotta be honest, I'm just not the biggest fan of middle grade, so I can see that quite a bit of the series is very funnily written, and I think a lot of younger readers will enjoy the series. However, it's just, I'm not the target audience for this series. That's just as plain and simple as it is. The second book I don't have physically here is also by Brandon Sanderson, and that is White Sand Volume 3. And White Sand is Brandon Sanderson's graphic novel series. This series is also set within his Cosmere universe. And the specific series is set on this world where you have two sides. One side constantly has sun and the other side is constantly dark. And so on the sunny side, like, sand can be magically charged, and then you have people, the Sandmasters, who can control that sand. And at the beginning of the first volume, there's a big massacre of all the Sandmasters, and we're kind of trying to find out what was going on. But yeah, I won't talk about this too much because it's gonna make me angry. I hated this series, literally hated this series. This series is the series that is the reason that I will now no longer say that Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author of all time, but only one of my favorite authors of all time, because I hated it that much. It was a horrible graphic novel. The world wasn't properly thought through. There were some things that I found low-key problematic, especially when it came to cultures in this world, and, you know, the decision of the characteristics of the different people from the dark side and the light side and so on, especially when it comes to social status, where social status, figures with social status very often were depicted culturally, not skin type way, but culturally in a very Western way, whereas lower-caste people were more often than not depicted in I would say ethnic way, mostly Middle Eastern, that type of thing. Yeah, made me really uncomfortable reading this, but aside from that, it also was just not a well thought through story. It was a horribly done graphic novel, which anyone will realize who has read any amount of graphic novels. And I know that Brandon Sanderson's involvement in this story wasn't that big, but to be honest, I don't see that as an excuse, because he in the end still decided that he's gonna slap his name on there. So yeah, I just hated this, and so moving on, because I'm starting to get in a bad mood. Moving on to my rereads. First, I have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, I read quite a bit of Brandon Sanderson in June. This is the second time that I reread this, so the third time that I read this in total, and you know, I just love this series so much. Going from Brandon Sanderson's absolutely worst ever to one of his best. I love Skyward so much. I'm pretty sure after rereading this now that Skyward is probably my second favorite Brandon Sanderson series after the Stormlight Archive. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna wait to finalize that decision until after I reread the Wax and Wayne series, but you know, I just love Skyward. Also, this is the first time that I reread this since I have read Starsight, which is the second book in the series. And oh my god, the setups in this book already for Starsight are absolutely amazing. I love this so much. And of course, I'm rereading this to prepare for the third book, which comes out in November. But let's talk about what this actually is about. This is a YA science fiction space opera, and it is set on this planet where humanity has lived for the past about a century probably, and where they are holding out against the Krell, who are aliens that are constantly attacking them. Now, the highest rank, or the highest social status you can ever get within this society is to be a fighter pilot fighting against the Krell, which obviously is the dream of our main character Spencer. The reason why that is her dream is because her father was a fighter pilot as well. However, in a very crucial battle, her father broke rank and defected, and so he was branded a coward. Because of that, also Spencer is branded a coward, and the people in charge of the flight academy don't want to let her in. However, she won't let that stop her from flying. So yeah, that's what the series is about, and yeah, I love it so much. Spencer is one of the greatest written characters ever. She has such a great character arc, and all the side characters as well. I love them all so much. Then next I have Ambassador's Mission by Trudy Canavan, which is the first book in the Traitor Spy trilogy, and this is the sequel series to Trudy Canavan's Black Magician trilogy, which I reread earlier this year. It's one of my old-time nostalgia favorites. I have a review up, and I will leave that link down below and up there as well. And yeah, I won't summarize this too much because that would kind of include spoilers, but basically we're following one of the sons from one of the characters from the earlier trilogy, and we follow him as he goes to this other country as an ambassador, and he, you know, uncovers some things there and so on. And then there's also some side plots where we follow characters from the earlier trilogy, and that's all I really want to say as a summary of this. But yeah, this was actually a reread. I read this when it first came out, and I really did not like it because there were some characters that were missing in this series for reasons, and I did not like that, which was why I gave this 1 star on Goodreads actually. And now I reread this, and oddly enough, I really enjoyed this. I mean, I still don't care too much about our main character, the one that's a son from one of the characters from the other series. I find him a tad bit annoying, to be honest. Also, his romantic plotline feels a bit contrived and forced, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. However, following, you know, the characters that we already know, I really love. I also was oddly surprised because my pretty much most hated character from the other series suddenly is my favorite character in this one, which I did not see coming. And yeah, I'm just really happy I decided to give this a second chance, and I'm excited to finish the trilogy. Next, I have A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, which is the first book in the Memoirs by Lady Trent series. And this series is a series that's set in a kind of Victorian England inspired world, but instead of everyone having an obsession with dinosaurs, everyone has an obsession with dragons, and so does our main character. And this first book basically follows our main character as she kind of discovers her obsession with dragons, and as she goes on her first, not mission, expedition to research dragons. And I really enjoyed this as well. I loved Lady Trent as a character. I loved her husband. Her husband is such an amazing character. and I love the way the two of them got to meet and everything. That was so well written. It's also a beautifully written story. It's written in a memoir format, which I actually really enjoy. I decided, or I discovered, I would say, that I only have a problem with first-person narration if it's not written in a kind of memoir style way. But if it's written like this, I actually actively really enjoy it, and I love how it's used, you know, as an active writing tool, and when you have kind of hints to what's gonna happen later on and so on. So yeah, I really enjoyed this series, can't wait to continue on, and yeah, that's on that. So I once again had to change my batteries, but next we have another surprise for June, and that was Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Wirtz. Although I gotta be honest, of what I've read from Raymond E. Feist so far, which to be honest is only one book, but I don't think he had much involvement in this beyond maybe editing it a little bit, and also this being set in the same world as his Rift War books. Well, kind of set in the same world. But yeah, I originally had no intention of reading this book, gotta be honest. I was recommended this before in my comment section, and I was like, you know what, not really intending on reading any more Raymond E. Feist, because Raymond E. Feist wrote one of the books that I hate the most that I've ever read. It's the book that has the inciting incident of the main character's childhood best friend being raped, him being sent off after killing the rapist, and him then later on in the book masturbating to, you know, the memory of how the supple breasts of his childhood friend looked while blood was staining her thighs, you know, that type of story. So yeah, had not really intended to read anything more by Raymond E. Feist. However, then Cleo from Bemused Bookworm sent this to me for Christmas, and I finally got around to reading it, and I am so happy I did. This is unlike any fantasy I have ever read before. It's like, okay, let's start with the summary. This follows our main character Mara, who was intended to be trained as a priestess. However, when her father and her brother die, she has to take over as the ruling lady of her family. This is also set in a kind of feudal Japan inspired world, and that's where some of the aspects come into it where I'm like, I'm not sure. I mean, this was written in the 80s, so, you know, awareness of cultural appropriation and so on, or if there's cultural appropriation within fantasy, if that's possible even, you know, those discussions weren't as prevalent as they are today. So I can put it aside that it's set in a feudal Japan inspired world. However, a helicopter just going by, because I'm living next to a hospital, and every now and again there's people coming with helicopters and helicopters going. But yeah, however, where something comes in where I'm like, is the names, because the names were all Japanese inspired names, but they sounded really weird to me. I don't know, there was something about the names was really off. And so yeah, be aware of that going into this. If that's something that you cannot set aside, you probably won't enjoy this book. And it's also part of the reason why it took me a bit to get into this book. However, the fact that this is set in a feudal Japan inspired world then actually really plays into the plot, and there's so many interesting things done with that. So it's not just that it's used as an aesthetic, but it's actually something that is, you know, very important to the plot and to the characters and how the characters act. And so you have our main character Mara, who is now the ruling lady of a family on decline, and she has to make sure that her family stays safe and that she stays alive. And she is such a good character. oh my god, I loved her so much, because she just used everything she has at her disposal, be it, you know, her sexuality, her beauty, her wits, her smarts, her maybe perceived innocence, whatever. She uses everything she has at her disposal to manipulate all the other characters around her and to make sure that her family is safe. And you know, there's just instances where it's so well done. And this is a very low action high fantasy. There's almost no action scenes. However, there's so much tension within this story, and there's moments that are more tense than any action scene I've ever read. And it's so well done, and I can highly recommend it. I am so surprised at how much I love this. Next, I have a book that sadly did not surprise me, and that is For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. This is the first book in the Wilderwood series, and I did enjoy this, but I gotta be honest, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the connection. I just wasn't invested whatsoever in the story. I don't think that it's any fault of the story or the writing itself. Just sometimes you read books and maybe it's not the right time for you to read them, or maybe it's just not the right book for you, but you know, that connection isn't made, and that was the case for me with this one. But what is this? This is set in a world where you basically have the Wilderwood, and the Wilderwood protects this kingdom from monsters, or the shadow something. And so there's this tradition that says the first daughter is for the throne and the second daughter is for the wolf. The wolf is the lord of the Wilderwood. And so whenever there's a second daughter born to the queen, that daughter is given as a sacrifice to the wolf so that the Wilderwood continues protecting the kingdom. Now, our main character, Red, obviously is a second daughter, and she is sent to the wolf. She is meant for the wolf. And so this, you'd think, is more a Red Riding Hood retelling, especially with, you know, you have the wolf, you have the main character whose name is Red, you have this cover, but I'd say it's actually almost one-to-one a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, more so than of Red Riding Hood. But yeah, so that's what this is about, and I enjoyed it. I want to continue on with the series, but it just didn't have a connection to this book for some reason. Then I finished the first Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie with Last Argument of Kings. The first Law trilogy is basically a grimdark adult high fantasy, and you follow a bunch of morally not grey but morally despicable characters. Like, one of the characters, for example, is a torturer, and yet somehow you still end up rooting for the characters. They are really well written, and I won't talk about this too much because I do intend at some point to have a review up of this, although by now I'm like 6 reviews behind in my schedule, so who knows when they'll be, probably in September or something. But yeah, I have to say that I probably enjoyed this book the least out of the trilogy. I did enjoy it still, and I enjoyed how it ended, especially since I kind of got the feeling of there being more, you know, plot threads left open and questions unanswered, rather than, you know, it being a perfect bow at the end. It's definitely a series where you know it's intended to continue on, where the story isn't over. So I did enjoy that, to be fair. But just overall, there were some reasons within this book why I didn't enjoy this as much as the second book, and not even the first book, because there were some elements that I won't go into because spoilers, that were there in the second book that weren't here anymore. So yeah, but overall still really enjoyed it and really happy with the ending of the series. Next, I have Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan, which is the second book in the Trials of Apollo. The Trials of Apollo is Rick Riordan's third Greek-inspired Riordan-verse series, and in this one we follow the god Apollo, who has been turned into a mortal, and he has to go on adventures to be turned into a god. And so yeah, I'm enjoying this well enough. I don't really know what else to say about this, to be honest, because, you know, I feel like this is another one of those series where I'm just like, I feel too old for this. Not that YA or middle grade is for any specific age, but still, even if anyone can read YA and enjoy it, YA still is generally intended for a younger demographic. And I just feel the person that I am today has moved past YA, or has moved past a lot of YA. And so yeah, I'm enjoying this. I want to finish the series because completionist here, but yeah, it is what it is. I think if you like Rick Riordan, you're definitely gonna continue on enjoying the series, but otherwise it's like there's nothing about this where I'd be like, yeah, you have to pick this up. Next I have Calpe Imperial, The Greatest Empire That Never Was, by Angelika Gorodisha and translated by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this one is one of the books that I'm reading for my international fantasy video. This is by an Argentinian author, I believe, if I remember correctly, and it's basically a collection of short stories following this greatest empire that never was, and you know, just going through it. And I won't talk about this too much because I will talk about it in that video, but overall I enjoyed it, but I also felt like I was too stupid and didn't have a lot of the connections that I would need to completely love and understand this book. 2 books left. First I have L'Archipel en Feu by Jules Verne. This is a historical fiction. I don't know when this was written, and I don't know when this is set. But in this one we basically follow like 2 captains of 2 different ships and a woman and something. I don't know. I cannot summarize this enough because I did not understand enough of this. I read this in French, but yeah, I can't say if it's in the vein of other Jules Verne or not, because I've never read any other Jules Verne. But yeah, so in between I understood things and then I didn't understand things. I cannot even say if the main female character is written in a sexist way or not, in a damsel in distress way or not, because there is this storyline of these 2 men fighting over her, and like one is the hero and the other one is the kind of pirate captain type dude. And yeah, but I read it and I'm proud of that, so that's on that. And then the last book I have is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, which is the first book in the Burning Kingdoms series, which I find it kind of amusing that you have Ashok K. Banker, who is an Indian author. So you have 2 series that are, you know, South Asian inspired, and Ashok K. Banker's series is called The Burnt Empire and this is called The Burning Kingdoms, and it makes for a lot of confusion. But anyway, this is, as I said, a South Asian inspired fantasy. It's an adult high fantasy, and we basically follow 2 characters. One of them is a princess who has been imprisoned by her brother, and she wants to get free, and she wants to, you know, what's it called, get her brother off the throne of this empire. The other character we have is a priestess in hiding. She is now the handmaiden of said princess, and their 2 lives intertwine in that way. And so yeah, it's also a sapphic adult high fantasy, and I very much enjoyed it. I now have read 2/3 of the sapphic trifecta. Cannot wait to get to She Who Became the Sun in probably August, not in July. But yeah, I won't talk about this too much because again, I do want to upload an entire review of this. This book was also the buddy read for June for my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and that book club is all about reading adult high fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks. So all the links, as always, if you're interested in joining, are down below. In July we're reading Jade City, but in June we read this. I think it probably was one of the books that I so far enjoyed the most in the book club, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Gonna have a whole review of this up soon, probably next week. Probably actually the next video you'll see after this will be the review of this. But yeah, that was it for all the books that I read in June. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. If you have read any of the books that I talked about just now, share your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, if you're interested in reading any of the books, tell me in the comments down below as well. Maybe I can push the books up on your TBR higher, or I can help you decide whether or not it's worth picking the book up. But yeah, all the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. All the links to my book club, as I said, are also down below, so go and check those out as well. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!